Tonight on The ReidOut.
I perceived his goal with all of this to keep Trump in office. But when he began acknowledging that maybe there wasn't enough voter fraud to overturn the election, I witnessed him start to explore potential constitutional loopholes more extensively.
Mark Meadows witnessed every aspect of the plot, and a new report says that Trump's lawyers believe Meadows will be the fall guy. But what, if anything, will the DOJ do about Trump? Also tonight, security footage from Uvalde, Texas, reveals more of the inexplicable lack of action by police as children were being murdered. Plus, we will share some astounding ignorance about female anatomy from the very Republican lawmakers who are using congressional hearings to cheer on the post-Roe state abortion bans. One of the witnesses joins me tonight. But first, we start with the breathtaking body of work that the Select Committee on the January 6th attack has presented thus far. And it is damning. What we know, 7 hearings in, is that Trump knew that he had lost. He was told so over and over again, that 81 million Americans preferred Joe Biden. But Trump, who has spent his life bending, if not breaking the law, decided to take matters into his own hands. Surrounded by yes men and what fellow Republicans called the crazies, Trump pursued 3 avenues to try to stay in power. First, the courts, a traditional and totally legal route which bore no fruits. Second, a mafia-style pressure campaign on swing state lawmakers, which had mixed results. And then third, the violent route of inciting an angry mob to attack the Capitol to pressure Mike Pence and the so-called rhinos to play ball. On January 6th, those 3 strategies converged.
3 rings of interwoven attack were now operating towards January 6th. On the inside ring, Trump continued trying to work to overturn the election by getting Mike Pence to abandon his oath of office as vice president and assert the unilateral power to reject electoral votes. This would have been a fundamental and unprecedented breach of the Constitution that would promise Trump multiple ways of staying in office. Meanwhile, in the middle ring, members of domestic violent extremist groups created an alliance, both online and in person, to coordinate a massive effort to storm, invade, and occupy the Capitol. Finally, in the outer ring, on January 6th, there assembled a large and angry crowd, the political force that Trump considered both the touchstone and the measure of his political power.
The committee's dragnet has been so methodical that it has exposed the potential criminal liability of individuals who aided and abetted Trump's coup. Those individuals include his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, middling DOJ official Jeffrey Clark, and supposed constitutional lawyer John Eastman. The committee's evidence is so strong that a California district judge accused Eastman of being aware that his plan violated the Electoral Count Act. Dr. Eastman, the judge said, likely acted deceitfully and dishonestly each time he pushed an outcome-driven plan that he knew was unsupported by the law. Yesterday, we got a glimpse of Meadows' own criminal exposure when we heard his assistant claiming that Meadows knew that he couldn't sell the big lie, so he put his full force behind a constitutional loophole, even though he knew that people were armed and that, as he himself said, things could get really, really bad. Unfortunately for Meadows, with Trump, no good deed goes unpunished. According to Rolling Stone, which spoke to 8 sources familiar with the matter, members of Trump's legal team are actively planning certain strategies around Meadows' downfall, including possible criminal charges. The magazine is also reporting that Trump in recent weeks has casually mentioned in conversations with some of his longtime associates that he didn't always know what Meadows was doing. Mr. Meadows just might be joining John Eastman on Jettisoned Island. Rolling Stone also reported that the former president has begun distancing himself from Eastman, claiming he barely knew him. 3 unnamed sources told the magazine that Trump's legal team have advised the former president not to discuss Eastman in order to limit potential legal exposure. Meadows is familiar with defenestration. He did try to overthrow John Boehner as Speaker back in 2015. I just wonder if Meadows will do what he did back then with Boehner by getting down on bended knees and begging Trump for mercy. Meadows is in this situation because of the committee. Full stop. In fact, the committee's work has been so thorough, revelatory, and explosive that it sometimes feels like they are showing the Department of Justice how it should be done. So what's taking so long? Why isn't the DOJ out front? According to the New York Times, the shocking testimony of Cassidy Hutchinson was so profound that it jolted top Justice Department officials into discussing the topic of Mr. Trump more directly, at times in the presence of Attorney General Merrick Garland and Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. One of the most prominent and well-respected prosecutors in the country, Andrew Weissman, wrote a critical opinion piece in the New York Times slamming the department's bottom-up approach to investigating the January 6th insurrection. He explains that their strategy is actually the wrong approach for investigating the January 6th insurrection, and that the public hearings of the January 6th Select Committee should inspire the Justice Department to rethink it. Joining me now, Glenn Kirshner, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Katie Phang, MSNBC legal analyst and host of The Katie Phang Show on MSNBC. And Charlie Sykes, editor-at-large for The Bulwark. Thank you all for being here. I do want to start with you, Glenn, because you have this situation where it is clear that Donald Trump at some point on between December 18 and that meeting with all of the Looney Tunes and some members of his actual real governmental consultancy, the legal people around him, he realizes that there is nowhere else to go, and he somehow decides, no, we're just going to do a wild protest on January 6th. That then happens. You see all the violence. Let's play a little bit of this. When he does that tweet, this is what immediately happened on social media. Take a look.
And now Donald Trump is calling on his supporters to descend on Washington, D.C., January 6th.
He is now calling on we, the people, to take action and to show our numbers.
We're going to only be saved by millions of Americans moving to Washington, occupying the entire area, if necessary, storming right into the Capitol.
You better understand something, son. You better understand something. Red wave. Red wave. This is going to be a red wedding going down January 6th. Motherfucker, you better look outside. You better look out January 6th. Kick that door open, look down the street. There's going to be 1 million plus geeked up armed Americans.
And more far-right responses. Why don't we just kill them was one of the posts. Every last Democrat, down to the last man, woman, and child. The average Democrat is a traitor. They do not care about election fraud. The punishment for treason is death. It's time for the day of the rope. White revolution is the only solution. And they literally brought a rope, which we now know through Ben Collins' great journalism. That's what day of the rope, that was sort of an indication of day of the rope. Donald Trump did all of that. Donald Trump caused those people to say those things and post those things, not Mark Meadows. So how could it be that Mark Meadows becomes the fall guy? Because everything he did was done for the president, for Donald Trump. How could Mark Meadows possibly be the fall guy when all of that stuff I just showed you was Trump's doing?
Well, Joy, Mark Meadows can only become the fall guy if the Department of Justice lets him become the fall guy. Should he be charged for his crimes? Absolutely. But does that mean the Department of Justice should stop at Mark Meadows? Absolutely not. Donald Trump is the hub of the hub and spoke conspiracy, which I've been talking about, including on your show, for a very long time. Donald Trump is the hub from which all of these criminal spokes radiated. And, you know, we heard about this battle royale in the Oval Office with Team Normal, you know, the folks that at least passed for adults in the Trump administration, the Cipollones and the Hirschmans, and Team Crazy, the QAnon crew, the Powells and Flynns and Giuliani's. And you got the sense from listening to the evidence that everyone in the room knew there was absolutely no evidence supporting these absurd claims of election fraud. None of that mattered to Donald Trump, because at the end of the day, it was by any means necessary. He was going to retain power. So in the early morning hours at the conclusion of that meeting, he sent the tweet setting the date for the Capitol attack. And all that was left was to try to violently stop the certification of Joe Biden's win. Meadows can't take the fall for any of that. He bears criminal responsibility, but, you know, the criminal buck has to stop with Donald Trump.